Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Lead left, grow right. That's what we're doing here once again with our friend Tony Marolt joining us here, who is the chief leader and president of the company. That's leadleftgrowright.com. Welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing terrific, Jill. How about yourself?
I'm good. So you're a consulting publishing company, just to share a little bit about that, if you don't mind. And also we know you're an author, which of course we'll dive into as well.
So that's the publishing part, and we'll
Yep.
get into some of that more today, as we have been the last several weeks. And then from a consulting standpoint, I focus on really two areas, leadership, training. I custom develop whatever you need. I've got some templates, but I start off with that and let you customize for leadership training. And then also integrated process assessment. So I would come into your company and take a look at your processes and see which ones are connected correctly or not correctly. And then I can also conduct some workshops on integrated process management.
Beautiful. And let's recap a little from last week. Our focus was on the future, not the past, and
Correct.
trusting leaders did their best at time. Let's recap a little from last week, if you don't mind.
Sure. We covered kind of 1 3/4 chapters in the book. So focusing on the future and not on the past, that's about trusting that leaders did their best at the time, given that the knowledge they have. A lot of times people hash around, well, why did these morons do this or whatever, and curse the people in the past. So it's about trusting that people did. And then it's your job to take whatever is your current reality and then move that forward in terms of solving the problem, changing the process, whatever it might be. And then we talked about failing. And from my perspective, failing is critical to learning, but you have to fail forward. You can't fail in place. So in other words, if you fail on something and you sit there and you just tread water and just are morose about it or thinking about it all the time and you can never move on, that's failing in place. We want to fail forward and say, hey, yes, I made a mistake, or I could have done things better. So assess that and say, okay, next time, here's what I'm going to do differently. That's where true growth lies in failing. And two of the areas we didn't really cover too much last time, but think about a swim team. You have medleys where you have individual swimmers doing different strokes, but it's all one team working together versus the individual. Let's say someone does the butterfly. True. Okay, that's an individual contributor. But in swimming, everyone works together on medleys. Same thing with rowing teams. And then we talked a little bit about end-to-end thought transmission, which is about not just being a thought leader. A lot of people throw that around, but also then being able as leaders to listen and ultimately take action. That's what I call end-to-end thought transmission. And then we talked about 2 + 2 = 4, or doesn't equal 4. And it really depends on the units. And the big thing from that is this chapter I wrote because of things that were existing in the media and print, online, etc. Context matters, and you'll find a lot of places don't really deal with context. And we talked about percentages without a base, for instance. And then we touched on the honor concept from the Naval Academy. The short version is a midshipman does not lie, cheat, or steal, and we expanded on that a little bit.
Got it. And well, also, we want to talk a little bit about what we're going to work on for today. Are we ready for that point now? It's chapter 5 conclusion, introducing the leadership manifesto.
And absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned.
So I want to finish up chapter 5 a little bit, and then I want to focus on something that's not in the book, but if I wrote the next book, it would definitely be in there, and that's called the Leadership Manifesto. So if we go back to chapter 5, it's entitled "That's a Fact, Jack," and I know one of your sons is called
Jackson.
Jack,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, correct.
Yeah,
Good memory.
and that comes from Bill Murray in the movie Stripes. And we touched on a lot of different things, like a midshipman does not lie or cheat, but a couple of things that we weren't able to touch on because of time. Voltaire, who is a famous sayingist, I guess I'll call that, but a wise philosopher. We actually think that may have been a woman now, using that as a pseudonym. But Voltaire said, "I may not agree with what you have to say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." And today, we talked about how things aren't necessarily free. There's lots of encroachment on free speech. And I guess the point I would make there is free speech is not always truthful speech. We have the right to free speech, but that's not always truthful. But it still should be unrestricted, because if we don't allow everyone to be in the public forum, whether it's stuff we like or stuff we don't like, we can't learn if we are just getting one or two sides. We really need to be able to look at the whole thing, right? So one of the examples I would use is on a guitar. If you're in a rock band, for instance, you can press a pedal on the floor and it distorts everything on the guitar. It makes it sound fuzzy and all kinds of stuff. So it really jumbles up the truth, which is underneath, which might be the melody or something. So that just is an example of how free speech can get distorted if we begin to encroach on truthful or untruthful speech being out there in the public. Does that make sense?
Yes. And, also just to bring up the fact that you say, what drove you to do it? So Dragnet, just the facts, ma'am. A midshipman does not lie, cheat, or steal. Definition. Steal
Yeah,
should be. Okay.
that
That's it. Okay. Got it. And, you teased us last time with the question of does 2 + 2 = 4. You brought it up again. So can you spill the beans?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 + 2 = 4. Most people say, well, of course it does. And you can see behind me, if you're watching this as a video, 2 + 2 either equals 4 or doesn't equal 4 based on the units. And so that's an example of how you can disprove something that everybody believes truthful without the context. So it goes back to things like using percentages. 80% of the men in northern Minnesota own a distillery. Well, if northern Minnesota only has 5 people, that's not a big deal. That's 4 people, right? So the big thing, 2 + 2 = 4 in the units, everything that we say, it has to be in context. You have to have context. And so look for that. I would encourage people, because the truth is really important to our integrity as a leader. And so look for examples as you read through things in books or the print media or online media, whether they include the context. Because if they don't include the context, there's probably a reason for that. And that means that they either have a bias or perhaps have their own agenda. So look for the context. And if it's not there, question people, say, so what about this? You didn't really cover that. Or, that percentage, is that based on something or nothing? So that's kind of the criticality. And excuse me for a minute, I did find a great quote. Is just one of those things that pops up, I think, in Facebook, but I'll read it and then I'll show it. Before you speak, let your words pass through 3 gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? We have a lot of unkind things happening, particularly on social media, but I'll hold that up so people can see, right? And I thought that was just a fantastic way of reminding us when we talk to use some filters as we think about it, because you can talk for talking's sake and not really convey anything, or you can convey meaning through that.
Got it. And let me ask, could you hold it up one more time?
Yeah.
For this, yeah, I can see it here, but not everybody's on Zoom. So I
Yes.
think, can we just say it before you speak? Let your words pass through 3 gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? That's it. That's it for those that couldn't see it. Thank you.
Yep. I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought I articulated that, but I may have mumbled. So sometimes I do mumble, so I have to watch myself. It's one of my leadership development things.
Well, and you say, let's see, how do you, context is key, as you say, right? And talking about the leadership manifesto, you know, it's pretty easy to work with, right? And it's not everybody, you know. How did you become an expert on this? How did you get this knowledge to teach us all of this when the manifesto in itself?
So the leadership manifesto, I've always done it to some degree, and I probably the last 3 teams that I led, I formalized it in what I'm going to read eventually to you. So a leadership manifesto, at one time I thought about franchising through a company called Academy Leadership, and they call it the leadership compass. I've always called it a manifesto because sometimes manifesto, I want people to react to that word. A manifesto is a promulgation of either an organization or an individual, and usually it has an exclamation point on it. So that's where it just kind of brought things home. And one of the things that they quote in there, Barry Posner and James Kouzes, they're also the ones that wrote that book I talked about, Encourage Your Heart. They study a lot in the leadership field as well. And so when you join a group, particularly if you're the formal leader of the group, some of the things that people want are they want to know, who are you? What do you stand for and believe in? Where do you want to take us? Why you? What qualifies you for this job? What makes you think you can do this? And lastly, but not importantly, is what changes are you planning to make? In my opinion, a good leader doesn't just walk in and within the first week wholesale change everything around. You've got to get acclimated to the environment, understand what the individuals on that team need, watch how they operate, etc. So I think these are really good questions. Would you agree, Jill, that any place that you've been, those are some of the questions that you want to know if someone comes in as the new boss?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love it. You know, where, you know, who are you? What do you stand for, believe in? Where do you want to take us? Why you? What qualifies you for this job? What makes you think you can do this? What changes are you planning to make? And, you know, it's all about, you know, what we should really include in this manifesto, as you mentioned. And you said you got to write it in third person, though, right? What leadership means to you independently, and take it from there. But I like the personal pet peeves one and hop-ons, because we all have them, right?
Oh, absolutely. And so, you know, that last one, what changes are you going to make, or any of the who are you? Well, what typically happens is a new boss comes into the group and people have to kind of feel out the boss. Okay, what is the boss like? What doesn't the boss like? Is you know, is she really a good leader? And often that can take sometimes a year or more before people figure out through either good or bad experiences what the boss wants or is. And that is just a huge waste of intellectual human capital. People shouldn't have to sit there and wonder and wonder and wonder. So what's the easiest way to do that? Is you just tell people, here's who I am, here's who I represent, here's where I'm going to go with you, and here's my pet peeves. So some of the specifics that Kuzes and Posner said are writing in the third person, as you mentioned, what leadership means to you. Convey your personal values. So this is not necessarily an easy exercise, because if you do it right, the leadership manifesto should change little, if any, from one job to the next. So this is about you and how you operate and what your beliefs are. So your personal values, operating principles, what are the non-negotiables? So that's setting an accountability bar. Okay, I'm not willing to deal with this. This is a non-negotiable. You have to be able to do this if you're going to work on my team. What are the priorities? What are your priorities? Personal pet peeves or hot buttons, as you mentioned, that's a big one. And most people, if they're a good leader, they know themselves. You know, they know what they don't do as well. There's no perfect leader. And then commitment, your willingness to take feedback. You have to tell people up front, I'm very open to feedback, or I'm very open to feedback, but only on these subjects, because you want people to provide you feedback, good, bad, or ugly. And so in individual staff meetings, I always ask people, you know, give me some feedback. What can I be doing better to help you do your job?
Got it. And why would you say it's important to create this manifesto and to really, you know, keep practicing it?
Right. Well, to me, it's a lot about integrity. You know, one definition of integrity is if you're going to say something, then do and act accordingly on a consistent basis. People don't like people who say things and then they don't adhere to them. That whether that's in a manager or boss level, whether it's in politics, whether it's just a personal friendship, people expect integrity, and you have to have integrity implies that you're consistent, and that's kind of based on your values and how you act. You can't shift your integrity around based on, well, I'm going to let this slide, but I'm not going to let that slide, etc. And so this manifesto, what you do is you promulgate it or share it to all of your team. And ideally, you would share it with your boss too and say, hey, this is how I operate. If you have a problem with this, let's discuss it now, and have that conversation up front so that you don't have any conflict that results later on. So again, it's a public commitment. And when you commit publicly, now you've introduced accountability.
Accountability, that's huge. Yep.
Yep. So if you say in your manifesto, this is what I'm going to do, and you don't, people should call you out on it and say, hey, you shared that manifesto, and you should say, yep, you're right. I apologize. I deviated from that. There was no excuse for that, or whatever it might be.
And you say integrity is really huge, right?
Yep. Yeah. You know, do as you say you're going to do. That's a definition of integrity. And so we talked about those, well, what should be included in the manifesto. And a lot of that stuff, people think, oh, well, this is going to be pretty easy. I know what my hot buttons are. That's true. You might know your hot buttons or not, but you have to think of it in context of how that's going to come across to people. But the hard stuff is your personal values, your operating strategies, who you are and what you're going to tolerate or not tolerate. Yeah. People think that's easy, and you can come up with surfacey kinds of things. But as I get into my manifesto, which I'd like to share with everyone, you can see that I had to work quite a while to be able to develop this. And so you think about leadership in your past and what you really want, etc. And then you got to put the pen to the paper, and that's the hard part. A lot of people won't do that, or a lot of people won't share it because they feel if they share it, then others are gonna, like I said, hold them accountable. So do this, and ideally, you would have each individual on a team develop their own leadership manifesto and share it with the team. Because that way, if everyone knows what other people's hot buttons are or what they value, wow, you can, now you can start to build a really organized, integrated team that kind of operates together. And they operate together because they understand how everyone else is going to operate.
Now, are you actually going to read us? Is this your manifesto?
Yes, this is my manifesto. So I'll read it. I may comment as I go through it, but due to time, and we can revisit this if we need to next time. But so here's my leadership manifesto. I am a unique creation, a human becoming, as are each of you. People are my purpose, not a means to some end. I am very privileged to serve you, but I expect much of you, the highest of standards. We will be challenged. It may make us uncomfortable, but overcoming obstacles makes us stronger, more resilient. My trust and confidence in your ability to do so is implicit. At my core is a belief that everyone is a leader. I expect you to be one at all times. To that end, you are expected to read A Message to Garcia and emulate the leadership behaviors of Rowan daily. A Message to Garcia, for those who haven't read it, it's a great story from the Spanish-American War. And so it's powerful enough for me, and I first read this when I was a midshipman at the Naval Academy, that I make everyone read, and then we talk about Message to Garcia. It's that important in terms of accountability and leadership. So let me continue. Management and leadership are not the same. However, both are required to achieve our objectives. Trust and respect provides the pillars upon which integrity rests. Each of us is judged continuously on our integrity. See that it is intact at all times. Treat each other with the greatest respect in completing our commitments. Authentic feedback is the only form of communication acceptable on this team, without retribution for sharing your perspective, even if that perspective runs counter to others. My overarching goal is to maximize our potential by taking advantage of all opportunities offered to grow and contribute more fully to this organization by creating an environment where the following: you can be great just the way you are. Fixing people is not my objective. And as an aside, we all know there's a lot of bosses that want to fix people and concentrate on your negatives rather than your positives. So back to the manifesto. You're encouraged to take intelligent, calculated chances instead of fixating on avoiding errors, to take action to move us forward and not to slow, pause, or misdirect pursuit of achieving our goals. Mediocrity or its cousin, apathy, are unacceptable. We can't tolerate either. Leave your personal agendas at the door so that our decisions are always based on what is best for the entire organization. Together, we will create achievable goals and attain them, but not at all costs. Timely follow-up is the norm to hold ourselves accountable to each other. Differences between mediocre and great leaders is their consistent practice of following up in order to complete our obligations fully and well. I am a lifelong learner, and my expectations are that every one of you will be as well. This is non-negotiable because we cannot achieve goals or high standards without being better, and being better requires us to always learn. Specifically stated, curiosity is a requirement on our team, always seeking to challenge our perspectives. Continuously learn, or you reduce our ability to solve problems in a world that moves more quickly by the day. Leadership is gaining knowledge and skill and then reflecting it out to others to increase its impact. Knowledge is power. Share it. Mistakes or failures will occur. We must always fail forward, translating our learnings from failures to correct or improve future occurrences of the problem. We will own our mistakes and hold ourselves accountable for preventing their reoccurrence. I am not the expert in most cases and don't need to be. Professionalism requires us to use every bit of expertise gathered from our formal training and through our work experiences to solve problems for this organization. Those problems must be solved in an integrated fashion to avoid siloed solutions. Politics is neither good or bad, it just is. Our job as leaders is to positively influence our peers and other leaders to make the best decisions under the current set of circumstances and constraints. Once made, decisions will be fully supported. If this manifesto is challenging to you, then you have correctly understood my intentions and expectations. It's better to swing for the stars and miss than to check your swing and fall short. Thank you for leading.
Bravo. Beautiful. Now, how long did it take you to put that together? How long has that been your manifesto for? Just curious.
It's been my manifesto, probably written in this form for at least 10 years,
Wow.
maybe a little bit longer. And as I said, probably the last 3 assignments in the corporate world, I went over this with everyone and had them ask questions, and they knew where I stood right away. And you could see I've woven a lot of what I believe about leadership that's in the book into the manifesto. So.
Great. Tony, thank you so much. If someone
welcome.
wants to reach out to you, remind us of all your contact information, please.
Sure. You can use the contact form at leadleftgrowright.com, and it'll send an email to me with your questions. You can email me directly at tony.marolt, M-A-R-O-L-T, tony.marolt@gmail.com, or you can just give me a ring at 816-694-4656. And I would love to have feedback.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time today. And
Thanks,
to all
Jill.
of our listeners, thank you. We appreciate you. Stay tuned. More of the shows on the way.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.